Welcome to the Tudor Dixon Podcast. Every so often you find somebody in Washington that seems like a really genuine, happy, normal human being. And that seems to be the person that I've found. So I have Senator Eric Schmitt with me. Thank you so much, Senator, for joining me.
Thanks, Tudor. Hey, I've been an admirer of yours from afar. And by the way, the best compliment I ever get in Washington is he seems so normal. So I'll take it. I will take the normal tag.
I was actually, I'm like going through all of your stuff and I was like, okay, so he was this badass attorney general and now he's a U.S. senator, and like what could he really be like? And here you are doing videos with your daughter and talking about family, and I was like, I really like this guy.
Oh, that's nice of you to say. Thank you. Thanks.
But I really like you for a few different reasons. And one is because you did take on the Biden administration. And here in Michigan, you know, that just wasn't the case. We didn't have anybody fighting back for us. And that's what your book is all about. You have a new book out. And to me, it's very important that people understand that they have this kind of guideline as to how to go after the left in court, because they go after us all the time. It's called The Last Line of Defense: How to Beat the Left in Court. And I think that's critical at this juncture, because we are at this point of wokeness where you can't have a normal conversation. You almost have to go to court.
Yeah, well, that's why I wrote the book. I feel like it's like a field manual for what it was like to be on the front lines against this left-wing lawfare machine. And I think for too long, conservatives have ceded way too much territory in the courts, because a lot of the fights that we care about end up there eventually anyway. And so before the job I have now, which is in the Senate, I was the Attorney General in Missouri. And at a really crazy time, Tudor, as your audience remembers, I think it is important to remember. I mean, this was a time of lockdowns, compulsory COVID shots, open borders, DEI struggle sessions, CRT in our schools, and a censorship regime that the Biden administration created that boggles the mind. I mean, it really is amazing. So this was a crazy time. And so with the job that I had, we just decided we were going to fight back. So we took the student loan debt forgiveness case to the Supreme Court, we won. We took the vaccine mandate case to the Supreme Court, we won. We filed the Missouri versus Biden lawsuit that uncovered, you know, before Elon Musk had bought Twitter, before these congressional investigations for the first time uncovered this vast censorship enterprise where all these agencies, along with big tech giants, were aimed at the American people because, you know, you questioned the vaccine, or you questioned masks, or you had a question about the Hunter Biden laptop story. They were literally flagging this stuff and going after individuals. And so I think the lesson of the book is there is a playbook for us now moving forward. And the book just hit the New York Times bestseller list for a conservative book's kind of a thing. So,
that's amazing. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. And but I think your audience will enjoy it, because it's not written for lawyers. I hope lawyers read it, but it's really about, as everybody was watching this, what was it like to take Anthony Fauci's deposition? What was it like to take Elvis Chan's deposition? All these like figures in this crazy story. We wanted to share that with people. So Last Line of Defense: How to Beat the Left in Court. You can get it anywhere right now and on Amazon too.
It's something that we've talked about so many times on this podcast, whether it's with a woke school or somebody that is shutting down your speech. And that's something that I think we cannot forget. You make such a great point. When Elon Musk bought Twitter, I think some of us were like, okay, we're finally free. And then the Republicans and the conservatives on our side, a lot of times it's like once you've gotten past that hurdle, you just move on, because we're very positive. We move in a positive direction. But it's important not to let history repeat itself, because once they get back in, they're constantly trying to shut us down. And I even hear it, even today, I hear them saying things like, you know, well, they can't say this, they can't say that. We've got to get them to stop saying this. And they can't stand President Trump because he stood up against this. And that's something that was interesting. I heard you say in one of your interviews that after 2020, when Joe Biden took office, there were a lot of people that kind of just went back into their holes and were like, you know, I don't really want to say anything. And I saw this in Michigan, where Republicans were like, okay, President Trump is not in office anymore. And they kind of felt like he's done. He's not coming back. And there's nobody that's going to fight on behalf of President Trump anymore. And you said, I was kind of this unknown guy that came out and kept fighting. And I have watched what you've done since then. And I'm like, I think this kind of unknown guy is going to do great things.
Well, thanks. Yeah. Well, I've never written a book before, but when you do, there's a lot of reflection. And in looking back now, I think my role was to be that last line of defense, to kind of hold the line until the cavalry arrived, right? Which was President Trump. And of course, this huge win last November when the fever broke, because it was a dark time and a lot of people were discouraged. And they brought everything. I mean, the left they were working every angle. And I think that's what I try to relay in the book too, is in that position at that time, I saw this full landscape. I saw it at the highest levels of government. And then in local schools in a place like Missouri or a place like Michigan, right? Like that the coast sort of overlook all the time. But how in the world does a superintendent in Springfield, Missouri become obsessed with, the slide decks of teaching, teachers and staff and other members of the school district to divide the room by race? They go to a conference and they get indoctrinated, and then they
Yes.
think that's like their toxic empathy, that they just like, and we opened up one of the things that I think you'll appreciate. We opened up a portal for parents during the mask debate, and we sued like 50 plus school districts for their mask mandates, and we won. And we were the only ones doing that at the time, because I just felt like this is wrong. There's no science to support 5-year-olds being forced to wear masks all day long. Like, you were twice as likely to die of a dog attack if you were a kid than of COVID. Yet they never wanted to stop. So somebody had to step up and push back. We did. But also, you would just see example after example. Parents would send us, we opened up a portal for like, what's the crazy stuff that's going on in schools? Kids were being forced to participate in privilege walks. Like,
Yes.
you know what I mean?
This is something we forget.
Crazy.
And teachers, the unions have these retreats, the superintendents, the districts have retreats where teachers go and they are told to apologize for their whiteness. I mean, this has gotten to a point where people are afraid to meet people of another race because they're like, I don't know how they're going to feel about me. This has created such a racism problem, and not even, I think, just a fear of connecting with other people, because like, I don't know how they're going to take me. It's better to just not connect at all. It's a terrible situation we're in.
Well, and this is what cultural Marxism is, which is every room is divided by oppressor and oppressed. That's really the goal. And then
Yes.
guess what? You got to hire a consultant to teach you how to do that better. There's a whole industry attached to it. And it's all based on division. And it's all, by the way, it's totally racist. All of this stuff is racist. And it's interesting. Now in the Senate, I had Hermeet Dillon, who's leading the Civil Rights Division. If you're doing this stuff, I'd be very concerned. If you're a private company, Coca-Cola, we talk about it in the book too, was having these sessions of literally how to be less white. In corporate America. So this stuff,
So racist.
it's crazy. And so, but I do think that the mainstream media never wanted to talk about it. What you're doing with this kind of diffused ecosystem now of information being diffused is really important, because people get it now. I think they had a moment in time that they pushed as hard as they could. And I think you're seeing a backlash. And I agree with you on President Trump. I think the first Senate endorser, maybe the second, when he was running again. And one of the reasons why is, we talk about what you were talking about, reference about me at the beginning, but he's just an authentic guy. Like, there's no people, the left and their media allies, they've never really understood it. They can't stand it. But he just connects. I think of my parents. I grew up in a working class neighborhood. My dad worked 7 days a week in the midnight shift. And I remember when he came down the escalator the first time, my dad was talking about, did you see what he said to CNN? Did you see what, he was connecting with how real people felt about stuff that most politicians were totally talking over, or they had kind of disdain for.
Right. He's not careful, and that because he doesn't think about being careful. And careful is such an interesting word to use, because politicians are careful, which is a kind way of saying they're not real. They're not, you don't know who they are. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And Donald Trump was like, you know what? I'm not going to do that. And that's the beauty but it's so hard for a lot of people, because one of the benefits that he has is that he came out, he was a known person. He came out with a lot of support. He was out there for years as a public figure. And I think that it's kind of an interesting dynamic, because you see some people, I've even seen it on the local level, where some people have come out boisterous and they try to be Trump. Trump is
Yeah.
Trump. Be you. It's hard
Yeah.
to get people now to be themselves.
Yes, no, that's right. And there'll never be another one like him. I was in the Rose Garden. There really won't be. I was in the Rose Garden for Liberation Day, and he's talking about, the renegotiating these trade deals, and he was, talking about how he was right 30 years ago and all this, but he was right. I turned to Jim Banks, who's sitting there. I go, we're never going to see anything like this ever again. Like, this is so unique, and it's such a special moment in time. But and the reason why I wrote the book, Last Line of Defense, How to Beat the Left in Court, is, man, there was a period of time where that didn't seem like necessarily where we would end up, right? And it was because, we were able to fight back. But also, President Trump stared down in a way that I don't know how many people literally on the planet could do it. It's certainly never happened in the United States before. We're literally somebody who came back in a non-consecutive term against all the lawfare, all the trying to bankrupt his family. He stared it all down, and he's on the other side of it. But you talk about that Liberation Day. We've been ripped off for Michigan, Missouri, all these jobs that went other places 30 years ago, 90,000 factories, because we had these trade deals that were meant to prop up Europe. They could rebuild themselves after World War II, defeat Soviet communism. Same with us over subsidizing NATO. He's finally the first president that said, you know what? That may have worked then, but we're getting ripped off. We want to renegotiate these deals now.
We were one of those factories.
I'm going to fight for the American people. So people know, intuitively understand he has their back. What they couldn't understand from the previous administration is, and people would ask me this, how does an American president, open up our border like that, where you don't know who's coming in? There's 20 million people here. What is the allegiance to our country? Where is that? And so no one ever questions that with Trump. And I think that's one of the reasons why he's such a powerful figure.
And we were one of those factories. We had a factory in Michigan, and after the recession in 2008, we just had so many of our customers were like, you know what, it's going to just be easier to go to Mexico or go to China. So many. I mean, we watched that in that season. We watched the steel foundries across the country, one after another, go out of business. And one of the greatest ones in California, and we were actually shocked that it had stayed open as long as it did in California. They'd had protest for years. It's just this ignorance of the left to understand why it's important to have that institutional knowledge to be able to manufacture on your own. And that, to me, is a crisis in and of itself. We have so few people left that can go back, start these factories up, and understand how to work in these factories. And that's why what President Trump is doing is critical now, because that could, one generation from now, that's lost if we don't do it now.
That's right. And for our national security, we cannot be reliant on China and other countries for the stuff we need to build F-15s.
Right.
That's insane. And we are in many ways, or have been.
Of course.
It won't happen overnight, but that's that's the sort of thing I think when people look back on this era, that's why I think President Trump's going to go down as one of our great presidents of all time, because of just the vision and the connection. But like I said, it didn't, it was a wild time in those 4 years that Joe Biden was in office. And with COVID in particular, you just saw people who never should have had the authority that they had abused it in ways I couldn't have imagined in this country. If you would have asked me 5 years ago if I thought that was possible in the United States, I would have said no. It's interesting. I met RFK Jr. for the first time in Utah when I was Attorney General, and he was familiar with the work that I was doing. And he, at the time, remember, he was a Democrat going to run for president. But he thanked me for the work that we were doing, and he was obviously out front on some of the COVID restrictions too, and how ridiculous they were. But he reminded me of this thing called the Milgram experiment. So in the 50s, Yale did this experiment where they had a guy in a white coat, an actor, white coat and a clipboard, looked like a doctor. And then on the other side, they had a paid actor on the other side of the wall who would scream when you turned up this pain dial. And they would bring people in and they would tell them to turn it up, even as they heard screams, and the screams got louder and louder, and people pleading for help. And then they would stop sometimes, like the person may have died. And what the experiment showed was that when an authority figure like that tells you to do something, a lot of people will do it. And that haunted me during COVID, because I just kept seeing things getting pushed further and further. You can't travel. You can't see a loved one die. You can't be in the hospital as they're dying. You couldn't, all this. You couldn't go to a funeral. You couldn't go to church. So the left, if they ever get this kind of power, we know what they'll do with it. In this book, Last Line of Defense, is a playbook of what we can do to fight back and win, but also recognize it and make sure it never happens ever again.
So let me ask you about Adam Schiff and Letitia James and this other woman from Michigan. I can't remember what her name is. All these people who are now in this mortgage fraud situation where I keep hearing the left go, this is no big deal. This is ridiculous. How could you possibly? And it's frustrating to me because I think, my gosh, if I did that, they would absolutely annihilate me over this. And they're acting like mortgage fraud is no big deal, but it's very obvious mortgage fraud.
Yeah, they don't want the rules to ever apply to them. And I think they know that they went for broke with Trump. They convinced them, and you could tie it all back to the Russiagate stuff. They made up stuff to turn him into a Russian asset, to spy on him, to prevent him from getting in the first place, then to try to sideline an administration and thwart the will of the people. I think there's indictments coming for that. I really do. I think there's a conspiracy charge that gets you outside of the statute of limitations for people like Brennan and Comey and Clapper. I think, and I hope there should be indictments. What they did to this country because they didn't like Trump and they wanted to get Trump is crazy. Also, one of the crazy historical quirks here, Tudor, the FBI general counsel at the time in 2016 during the Russiagate was a guy by the name of James Baker. Well, guess who was the general counsel of Twitter during the Hunter Biden laptop censorship stuff in October and November of 2020? James Baker. So what the book gets into... That
is crazy.
Isn't that crazy? The book gets into this censorship enterprise. It wasn't just like one person. So when we filed the lawsuit, Missouri versus Biden, we saw Jen Psaki, saying, oh, we're flagging stuff for Facebook. And they were talking about a disinformation governance board. And what the hell is that? Sounds like a ministry of truth. So we said, there's enough here to file a lawsuit. So we filed a lawsuit, but instead of getting the injunction first, which is typically what happens, and an injunction for your audience is you get the government to stop doing something you don't want, or another party to stop doing something immediately through a temporary restraining order, something like that. We said, you know what? We were being charged with saying this was a conspiracy theory, or we were making stuff up, or was just for attention seeking. So we want discovery first. The judge granted us discovery, and what we got was shocking. Like the emails, the thousands of pages of communication between high-ranking government officials saying, this comes from the top, the very top of the White House, take this down, and they would take it down. They would threaten investigations. But it wasn't like the CDC was involved. They were saying, if these words or phrases are uttered, take it down. The FBI
was involved. So shocking.
It is. An agency called CISA, which is this cybersecurity agency, they were involved. Like millions of voices were being silenced or throttled or taken down or deplatformed in the modern day town square, which is virtual. So this is our government that was doing it, and we exposed it. And it has shaped my view of a lot of things, having seen what I've seen. And in the book, I try to share that with people because, again, like you said earlier, Republicans are genuinely good, decent people who want to, provide for their families, raise their families. They don't view government as such a central part of their life like the left does. But I think that we have to be aware of what was going down and the courage, I think, that it takes to stand up and fight back.
I think that's why midterms are so challenging, because the average conservative, the average Republican is like, you know what? Government's not that big of a deal. I'll vote for president. I'm not going to come out every time, because they don't see government as a form of control. But that's the left. The left is absolutely, they are boots on the ground. We got to get out there. Mandami, or all these people who are out there saying, you know what, government's going to be everything. And they are training these kids to believe this. I mean, my daughter brought her history book home the first day of school, and she said the teacher said, and they go to a Christian school, she said the teacher said that he ordered this not knowing that it was really anti-Trump and that he knows parents are going to be mad, but she said apparently it's anti-Trump through the whole thing. I open it, just open it, the first page is Charlottesville, the whole thing, and it's all a lie. And I'm like, how is this a history book? I mean, this is really, this is not ending. There's never a time, there's never a year off for Republicans. There's never a time to get to slouch and not go out and vote. You have to be in every aspect of this because the lies are so, they know they have the kids, they have the teachers, they can get to you. They can stop the progress of conservatism, and they can also stop what this country is and change it. And that's terrifying to me. I want to ask you, before you go, I want to ask you about St. Louis, because we have obviously a very similar situation in Detroit. I think St. Louis, I think, is fourth this year. But in the past, we have competed for the number one spot as most violent city in America. Yeah. This year,
we'd
Detroit...
rather be fighting for the World Series than for that title, I think, right? We'd rather have the Tigers play the Cardinals than that be up for grabs, yes.
Seriously. I mean, it's so sad. And Memphis has gotten in there, and Baltimore's gotten in there. And these are all controlled by Democrats. These cities are all controlled by Democrats. And you see what's happening in Washington, D.C. right now. What has it been like, the change on the ground there in safety? And what has it been like to see your colleagues freak out about the fact that Trump is keeping people safe?
Yeah, I think what this is, we talked about trade and all the other stuff earlier. What President Trump is doing is he's challenging all these assumptions that people have had about problems that are intractable. And what he's saying is, we're not going to give up on violent crime in some of the areas that have been affected by it the most. Washington, D.C., right? Look at what's happening. I mean, carjackings are down 85%. Robberies are down 50%. I mean, it's a presence, and there's just no substitute. And as a former prosecutor, my lived experience, there's just no substitute for a law enforcement presence and prosecutions that follow. You can do all the other stuff you want to do, and you can talk about it. You can use flowery language, and you can talk about social workers, all this. And God knows the world needs social workers. But if you want to solve violent crime, you have to get the bad guys off the street and you put them in jail. Okay? Because there's a subset of the worst who do a lot of the really bad stuff. And once they're taken out of the equation, that helps. Then other people see they've been taken out of the equation. That helps. So there's a deterrent effect. There's just the bad people are off the streets. And the quite frankly, the black communities in St. Louis and Detroit have been victimized the most. They're the ones tired of cleaning up the glass on Sunday mornings. And they want help. Like, if you talk to real people, they want help. I've been in the neighborhoods. When I was AG, we partnered with federal prosecutors because we had a Soros prosecutor for a while. She's gone. We tried to basically help with federal prosecutions for gun crimes. So what's happening now is, I think President Trump's changing the dynamic. The Democrats somehow, some way, Tudor, have figured out a way to be on the wrong side of another 80-20 issue because they hate Trump. It's the same reason why Trump's going after illegal immigration and they find themselves down in El Salvador having margaritas with an MS-13 gang member who beats his wife. Like, how do you screw that up? But they can't help themselves.
But they don't think they screwed it up. They're still on his side. Which is
why I don't think they've hit rock bottom. But one of the things that I've done, and hopefully becomes a model, we've worked with Kash Patel. St. Louis is getting now the largest infusion of permanent FBI agents to take on violent crime in the country. I'm not going to give up on St. Louis, the crime issue. It's like Detroit. These are great American cities that deserve so much better. And we just can't give up on them. And I think President Trump has this desire to do it. And he doesn't care if that, maybe 80-20 didn't vote for him. Like, he wants to fix it. But you got to want him to come in. I think he's making that clear. J.B. Pritzker, I mean, shame on a guy like that. These mayors, they're just, it's not in the interest of their citizens, but they just have Trump derangement syndrome so bad, Tudor, that they can't help themselves. So
let me ask you this, because you have a similar city in Detroit. The mayor of Detroit, we were having this situation where houses were like these meth houses, and they would catch on fire, or people would set them on fire to try to get rid of them. So he was like, you know what, we're going to go through and we're going to tear down all the houses that are in these communities. And he prides himself on the fact that he has ripped out all these homes in the city of Detroit. And, they try to partner with this group that's going to build a low-income housing in one of the towers there. And I just think of, I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, so I'm like, okay, so we'll have Cabrini Green in downtown Detroit. And now this guy who, let me tell you, he has allowed, they have reduced the number of cops. He has allowed the crime to continue on the streets. The ripping down people's homes did not stop crime. I mean, that's the thing that blows my mind. Just because the house is not there, the crime is not gone. Our jails are full. Our prisons are empty because nobody wants to give them the real sentence they should have. So like to your point, once you get the few bad actors off the street, then it frees up the other people to live a normal life and not be controlled by these. I mean, essentially, it's like a bully in a school. You know, when you have a gang member who leads everybody, if they're still there, they're going to continue to control the situation. Instead of getting them off the streets, you destroyed the history that was there. Now this guy wants to be governor. What is your response to something like that? That's the thinking, is to go and wipe out the community.
I think, and I start the book with the line, in November of 2024, the fever broke. And I believe that on so many different levels. I think that fever dream we were living, which also included, it wasn't just Biden's crazy administration that was coming after our freedoms or COVID. It was this social unrest that the left, I mean, you know, they were delivering bricks on pallets as soon as the sun went down, like this network that was wanted to, it basically, I mean, their desire is, if you study Marxism, is to kind of untether people from the things that hold them together, the nuclear family, church, you know, sort of like community organizations that people, you know, the Knights of Columbus, stuff like that. And you replace it, and the way you get there is chaos, where people they feel very unsettled and they're looking for something, and then government, which is effectively the religion, steps into the place of all this stuff. So that's what they were doing. That's what they were doing in the summer of love in 2020. And I think their high point was, for them, they had the attention and they got companies to do a bunch of crazy stuff. But you saw a lot of law enforcement leave, take early retirement, or never get into the profession in the first place. So we're still digging out of that. But the hope is, I think, that now that like normal people are speaking out and saying, you know, we want a bigger police presence. Yeah, like we actually want to take on violent crime, and our communities deserve to feel safe. I think you're seeing people being re-energized by that. But for the big city mayors that still talk about defunding the police, or maybe use language that's less direct than that, reimagining whatever the nonsense the term might be, they're on the wrong side of history here. It's not complicated. Like, you need more police officers, and their presence on the street really matters. And you go and arrest bad guys, and then you prosecute them and put them away for a long time. Like, it's actually not, it's not 2020 anymore. Like, we don't need to apologize for that. That's just the truth. It's the truth. So we just got to go do it. But I think there's more men and women of courage that want to do that and are willing to speak out about it. But, you know, a few years ago, you know, there were a lot fewer people who were willing to say those kind of things. That's for sure.
Well, you know what? The guy who stood and looked in the face of all of this lawfare and everything that you were talking about earlier, President Trump being out there every day saying we're not going to stand for this, that helps people stand up. And I assume that helps people in these states who are attorneys general and prosecutors to say, you know what, we're just not going to do this anymore. But I do think they should read your book. So tell us again, give us all the details on the book, where you can get it, all that.
Yeah, it's the last line of defense, How to Beat the Left in Court. You can get it on Amazon right now or anywhere that you buy your books. Yeah, it's New York Times bestseller. We're excited about that. And I think it's reaching a broad audience right now, which is really important. It's a playbook of how we beat the left in court. And it recounts all this crazy time where we stood up and we fought back. And I hope that it provides a roadmap for the future.
Absolutely. So go out and get it, because there's this guy who is this just normal, common sense guy that happens to be a senator. And we're so glad that you are. Senator Eric Schmitt, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks, Tudor. Let's do it again.
Absolutely. And thank you all for listening to the podcast. Make sure you go over to the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, and join us next time on the Tudor Dixon Podcast. Have a blessed day.